thinking, okay, is this pouring into my kid, or is this just withdrawing from my kid? Mm-hmm. And so you need to look for signs of like, okay, my kid enjoys coming. Like I don't have too much trouble getting them out of bed to come to church. Mm-hmm. I was just speaking at a kids ministry conference last week, leading a breakout, and my topic was how to tell Bible stories to kids. I can talk all day about just how fun that is to see kids like get God's word. As a dad, I want my kids to love their faith. I want them to love God's word. I want them to love Jesus.
Welcome to the Hard Questions with Bad Christians podcast. My name's Michael. I'm your host. We start every episode the same way by reminding you that I am not a pastor, I am not a preacher, I am not the smartest man, and I am not a teacher, but I am a Christian with a sketchy past, and I have some questions, so let's dive in. Now, I am so excited for today's episode, and I believe this will be one of the easiest and most impactful episodes that we will have, just purely based, number one, on the topic that we'll be discussing, and number two, who we get to discuss that topic with. Now, the topic of today's episode, I'm literally in the thick, waist deep right now as we speak, and that is how to lead our children to Christ. So today we're going to talk about, number one, how to feel comfortable bringing your kids to church. Number two, how to make sure that your kids have a great relationship with God. Number three, how to read the Bible to your children and discuss those hard stories, those hard topics. And most importantly, how to make sure that when your kids grow up, they not only have a firm foundation in faith, but they don't hate going to church. Now, my guest today, we are absolutely, it's a pleasure to have with us. I couldn't think of anybody better to discuss this topic with. My guest today has been in ministry, specifically children's ministry, for over 20 years. He's a speaker that speaks to thousands of children pastors and gives them resources and ideas of how they can help to lead the children in their church to Christ. He's a published author. He's came out with a number of books. Most recently, a 52-week devotional called Let's Walk, which I'm doing with my family, with my children right now, and they absolutely love it. But that is not the only reason that I'm excited for today's episode. I have 4 kids myself, and to my 2 oldest boys who have been going to church with us since they were little, I told them we were having the podcast today, and I told them who our guest was going to be, but I took it a step further, and I showed them a picture. Both of my kids' faces lit up. They said, "We know him. He teaches us about Jesus." And they were so excited. And as a parent, as a father that strives to make sure that my kids have a relationship with Christ, it just puts so much happiness and joy in my heart to know that they are being led by a Bible-believing church and by a children's pastor who truly exhibits the fruits of the Spirit and the love for Christ. So my pleasure to introduce our guest today from Bayside Church, children's pastor, ladies and gentlemen, James Hamilton. James, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Well, thank you, Michael. That's a lot of pressure now. You set me up. What a build-up. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be part of this. I know we've been in conversations right from the start of this podcast when you just came to me with this idea. And so to be sitting here, to see you in action and to be part of it, what a privilege. Thanks for letting me be here.
100%. James, thank you so much for being here. And I will tell the audience, me and James are friends. We actually met at a Bayside event that I was volunteering at. And kind of funny, I don't typically like to be in the middle of everything. I'm really good at being a supervisor, really good at being a coordinator. But I've learned when I volunteer, my job is just to step back and put myself where I need to be the most helpful. So that day, I was kind of trying to find a quiet place to sit at. James happened to be sitting there too. I sat down with him, had no clue what your role was at Bayside. I did know you were a part of the staff and a pastor, and we had a great conversation. Turned to find out you're the one that's helping to lead my children to Christ, which I absolutely appreciate. And when God gave me the idea for the podcast, the very first person that I reached out to was James, and he asked me some very pivotal questions about what I want to get out of the podcast, how we were going to do it. And I remember he said, "I want to be your biggest cheerleader through this," which you have been. You brought us one of our guests, Jeremy Brownlee. Shout out, Jeremy. me. He was a fantastic guest.
Oh, yeah.
So you have been all over this podcast without anybody knowing it, and I'm so excited that we can have you here as a guest.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Let's see where this goes.
Let's jump in.
Yeah.
So first question we always ask, where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? When'd you become a Christian?
Well, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from California. No, I was born in Scotland, actually. I'm a Scotsman, just outside Glasgow. But when I was 7, we moved down to England. My dad's a pastor, and he got called down to a church just outside London, about 30 miles east of London on the coast. So a little seaside town called Southend-on-Sea, which is like the equivalent of like Santa Cruz. Kind of like a little bit cheesy, bit, like not always the best place for a teenager to grow up, with all the kind of seaside attractions and stuff like that. But so I grew up in England, and followed a career in theatre. Actually, going to school, I never really was that academic. Didn't really. Funny, I'm an author now, but like I wasn't really into any particular academics. But I loved performing, and I loved acting, and drama was the subject I just loved. I remember at the end of my, so it was year 11. So I guess that's be like once you finish high school, you get like an end of report. And in the report, one of my teachers had said, James still hasn't quite figured out what school's all about yet, as I was about to leave. So, but theatre was my thing. Studied that at college. After college, I went and joined a touring theatre company, which then I started a children's touring theatre company. This was a Christian company. We traveled all over the UK, Europe. We came to the US, doing theatrical productions mostly based on Christian stories. So stories like The Hiding Place, Cross and the Switchblade. You might not know what they are, but they're really pretty famous Christian stories, like autobiographical stories. And so I loved performing and being on stage and touring. And then eventually I met a girl, my wife, Callie, and realized I couldn't be married and live out of a suitcase. They didn't go well together. And so I started a position at a church as I had to help lead their kids ministry. And, growing up as a PK, a pastor's kid, I always said I'm never going to be a pastor. Like I saw underneath the hood of what leading a church is. And I always said I'll follow any career, but I don't want to be a pastor. But so often God has other ideas. His sense of humor, he's like, I kind of fell into being a kid's pastor. And that's the path that God, put me on. So was leading a kids ministry at a fairly big church in the UK, as well as doing a lot of training and using like theatre and storytelling. And then out of the blue, one day got a phone call from a church in Kansas City, Missouri.
Wow. Literally
just out of the blue. So apparently I'd had my resume was on a staffing website, which I'd forgotten about. I think I'd used it because I wanted to create a resume. I didn't have a resume and wanted to find a template for one. And so it was on this website randomly. So my eldest son was just about 2 at the time. And I remember this phone call, and I looked at my phone and it was a US number. And I was like, who's calling me? I think that's a US number. So picked it up, and it was, hey, this is Pastor Rick Friesen from Abundant Life Baptist Church in Lee Summit, Missouri. We're looking for a kids pastor, and we saw your resume, thought you might be interested. You like my accent. That's pretty close.
Loved it. Nailed it. Yeah, the theater background.
And so, I was like, this has got to be a wind-up. Like, so Missouri, that's America, right? Okay. Let's talk. Let's see how that goes. So I remember when my wife came home from work, and I was like, you'll never believe the conversation I just had. Some church in Missouri, America, are interested in. They found my resume. They're interested in getting us over there. And, so very long story short, we had some Skype interviews. I came out. They offered me the position. I said, no, I need Callie to come and visit first. This is a life change, right?
Smart man.
Yeah. So you can't make a decision like that without, it was a life-changing decision for us. So Callie came out. We just fell in love with the people there. Weren't sure what we were letting ourselves in for, honestly. But we just felt that God was opening that door for us, and we just kept, walking through it. And we just kept saying, Lord, if this is not right, close that door. Otherwise, we'll just keep following you. Well, we thought God did close the door because our visa got denied. We had applied for a religious worker visa, and because we attended a church that was in a denomination that wasn't in the US, just through a little technicality like that, they said no. So it's like, okay, well, that was interesting. But the church said, look, we'd like you to come and speak at our kids' camp. So I was like, yeah, okay, we can come and do the kids' camp, and then that's probably the reason why we went through all this process. So they picked me up from the airport and said, we're going straight to the immigration attorney's office. We've got another plan to get you here.
Wow.
So wait, what? So again, long story short, that we found a different route through a different kind of visa, which then was successful. And so on February 13th, 2013, we stepped on a plane and began our new life in the US. And so I was a kids pastor there at that church for 6.5 years. And then God called us to go even further west to Bayside here in Sacramento area. And so we've been here for about 6.5 years.
Wow.
So it's been a wild journey for sure.
Been an interesting trip.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. When you and your wife, when you got that call from that church in Missouri and you had to approach your wife about that, and as things got more serious, can you explain to us kind of how that felt for you and your wife?
Yeah.
I assume that was a lot of praying involved with that and making sure that God's hand was in this. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Obviously, there was initial kind of shock and excitement and intrigue. And it wasn't, when I say it was completely out of the blue, actually, it really wasn't, because, we had been praying about what was next. I was working part-time for the church, part-time doing ministry stuff, and we just kind of felt like we were always chasing our tail, like just, we were unsettled. And we'd been to the US. I'd been to the US with the theater company a couple of times. Callie and I had come to a conference at Willow Creek Church in Chicago, and we just loved the US, and we just loved the scale of everything. And being in ministry and kids ministry, there's nothing at the scale in the UK that you can do things here at the US.
Really? Wow.
As far as size of churches or just like resources available and just this. And so there was always in the back of our minds, like, wouldn't it be cool to like go to the US and do ministry there? But never really, thinking that would ever be something that would be credible. And so isn't it funny how like God just like hears and plants those dreams in your mind, in your heart? And sometimes like he does that for a reason. He plants those seeds, he gives you those experiences, he puts that on your heart, and then suddenly opens that door for you. And you just got to be ready. It's like, wow, God did open that door. God did give us that opportunity. And we didn't even have to try that hard. It just happened. So, but then, reality for us began to set in. It's like, well, okay, we got to tell our parents that we're literally uprooting, we're leaving this continent. And so, we had an almost 2-year-old son at the time. And so for us, the adventure was more exciting than daunting, but the hardest part was leaving all of our extended family and everything we pretty much knew here in the UK. But the biggest hang up I had was, okay, I have this 2-year-old son this decision, we've had, over 30 years of life and experience here in the UK. This is really changing the trajectory of his life. Mm-hmm. This is a bigger decision for him than it even is for us. And so I was just very emotional and tearful about that. And then I remember just one night, the Lord brought me right to the story of Abraham and how the Lord spoke to Abraham, and he called him to out of where he was and to go to a completely different place. The same story as ours. Like, I'm calling you and I'm uprooting you. And he said, I am going and I am preparing the land for you and your descendants. And so the Lord kind of just basically said, like, I've already prepared that place for your descendants. So basic translation is, I've already got this. And I've got Elijah's, your son's, life planned out over there. I've gone before that. And so that for us was like, okay, that's full confirmation. It's like, that's how God just uses his word to really confirm things.
Yeah.
So it was a hard move. Like, it was very emotional, and honestly, like the first 2 weeks that we were in Missouri, we were staying in somebody's house. There was a snowstorm, was a foot of snow, and we were kind of looking out the window like, what have we done here? Second week we're there, it snows again. So there's like literally 2 foot of snow. We're like, what is this place? Like, what have we done?
A lot different than Santa Cruz weather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was definitely a cultural shock moving from, outside London to Midwest. Mm-hmm. But the people there, Abundant Life, just incredible. So, and we're lifelong friends with many people there in Missouri. We've been back a couple of times now, and so God. I always say, like, your home is where God puts you. Mm. And so, I can say I'm from the UK, or I'm from Scotland, or I'm from Missouri, or I'm from Roseville. Like, my home is exactly where God has placed you. And I think that's always something I like to go back to, is like, well, I'm just where he needs me.
Mm-hmm. Where he needs me today.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Beautifully said. Now, let me ask you this. Were you a children's pastor before you had a kid?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, kind of. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Callie and I were married for 6 years before we had kids. I like to say we enjoyed our life for a while.
No chaos for a while.
No, I can't even remember what that was like now.
Yeah, me too.
So I was kind of full-time kids pastor at a church, and then I went part-time. And when I was part-time, I was, doing a lot of using storytelling and drama in schools. Mm-hmm. I was doing some training. I was lecturing at a Bible college, and so that's around that time is when we had Elijah. So, so I know why you're asking that question, because when you lead a kids ministry, it's one thing. When you have a kid in that kids ministry, it's another thing. And so I've really always tried to look leading a kids program, look through the eyes of, like, what's this like for my kid? Mm-hmm. Is my kid safe? Is my kid having fun? Is my kid growing in his faith? My boys are now 14 and 11. They've pretty much like gone through the whole kids ministry. And so being a parent has really been formational in helping me to lead a ministry in a church, because selfishly, like, I want my kids to love church.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get to have a say in that.
Yeah.
I don't just get to send them and hope for the best.
Yeah. And it's so interesting as I kind of learned your story today and previously when we've chatted, and now I listen to what my kids do in church, and there's a lot of acting, there's a lot of storytelling and things like that. So I love the way that God prepared you in your younger years for what you're doing 100%. Today and how to work with children the correct way so they truly understand. So man, that is a blessing. Yeah, that's I was just speaking at a kids ministry conference last week, leading a breakout, and my topic was how to tell Bible stories to kids. Mm. So this is probably the one thing, other than Jesus and my family, I'm most passionate about. Mm-hmm. It is, how do you help kids fall in love with God's word? Mm-hmm. How do you help kids realize that this isn't just another book?
that the Bible is living, it's alive, and can speak to their lives. And so for me, being able to use the gifts that God gave me in like theater and storytelling and creativity, to marry that with like, how do you take the words out of these pages of the Bible and bring them to life for kids? So it's like, this is unbelievably amazing and fun and exciting and challenging and dramatic and emotional. Like knowing not just like the overall picture and story of God, but the individual stories and characters in the Bible. Like I can talk all day about just how fun that is to see kids like get God's word and apply it to their lives.
But let's talk about that. Let's dive in a little bit there. One thing I saw as a parent is, right when I had made the commitment, my kids have always gone to church with us. And I think we were very blessed to have them in church at a very young age. So they've grown up in it. But I know a lot of friends of mine are walking into church for the first time. And let's say their kids are 8, 10 years old, 6 years old, teenager already. So a little different than what my family had. But when I made the commitment, I'm going to read the Bible with my kids, right? I asked them, made it part of their choice. I said, do you want to wake up with Dad 15 minutes early every day and we'll read the Bible together? Both of my older boys, oh yeah, I want to get up, I want to read it. So the first morning we get up, I pull out the Bible, I pick out the story I want to tell them. I get a couple verses in and they are tuned out, wanting to eat something for the morning. And I realized as a father, man, I can't read the Bible to my kids the same way that I read it. So you talking to me as a father, what's some things that we can do to actually read the Bible with our kids?
Yeah, it's choosing your own like rhythm. So like, I'm not a morning person, and neither are my kids. Okay, and so for me to say, right, we're waking up 15 minutes early to read the Bible together, it's just like, that's not going to work for them. So for us, it's been more like a bedtime at night. Okay. We've kind of treasured those moments. So growing up, the boys, it's been, they're 11, 14, their whole life, they've had that rhythm and that routine at nighttime is like time with mom or dad, and reading the Bible. So, but I think you have to be a little bit more kind of strategic and systematic about it. You can't just kind of pick up the Bible. Let's just pick any old verse or any old story and read it. You can do that, and there's power to that. But that's kind of why I wrote the book, Let's Walk, and we can talk about that more. Yeah, let's dive in. There's a lot of really good devotion books out there for kids. I can think of a few, like Indescribable by Louis Giglio, Roar Like a Lion by Levi Lusko. Some of those books, there's stuff by Rick Warren. There's a lot of good, kids devotion books out there. And so a lot of the time we would work our way through those. So there might be like maybe 100 devotions. And so that would include a verse, a Bible verse, and then a little devotion, maybe a prayer at the end, and some nice pictures for the kids to look at.
And real quick, if we can rewind real quick. I'm a newer believer. A lot of the listeners are newer believers. And I know one thing really special about our friendship is from the first day we met, I have to pause you sometimes and go, hey man, what does that mean? I didn't grow up in church. Like the term you used earlier, PK. I mean, the first conversation we had, you said, growing up being a PK, I'm like, what's that? You're like, pastor's kid, I forgot. You're not, So maybe rewind a little bit. I just learned about a year ago what a devotional is. Can you maybe explain to the audience, what a devotional is, how we should read it, and how it's different than just opening up your Bible and reading a story?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a devotion would be commentary on, or just somebody writing their thoughts on what is this particular passage saying. So devotion, I guess the word devotion means that you are devoted to something, that you're actually trying to learn more. So you might be devoted to baseball and learning about your baseball team. So you dive deeper, right? And so a devotion will be like that I would take a Bible passage or a verse and I'd devote myself to learning more about that. And so somebody would devote some thoughts for you to like think more about what is this Bible actually Bible verse or passage say? What does it mean? What's the background, and so on. So a kid's devotion would be really more how do you take this verse and then apply it to your 8-year-old life? And so a lot of the kids' devotions will be dealing with real things that kids are experiencing now. So fears, bullying, obeying your parents, those kind of things. So devotion books generally are like that. So, but for me, not necessarily really all about the devotion part. It's like I just want to get my kids into God's Word, and so get them used to like learning what is what is God saying through this. This isn't just facts, but this is like transformation. This is life, and this helps you tomorrow when you wake up and you go to school. You're going to remember what God said about this, or this is how this character in the Bible experienced this same feeling or fear that you have. So every night we would do that. So we would read a Bible verse, we'd read the devotion, we'd pray, and then maybe we might have a conversation about it. So there would be maybe even questions in that devotion. So when I wrote Let's Walk, I felt like I wanted to bring together everything I liked about every devotion book that we'd done and put it in one place. The other reason I wrote Let's Walk was there's 52 devotions in it. How many weeks are in a year? 52. So you might not feel like, oh man, every night I got to do this. Like that's a big commitment. So when I was a kid, my parents would take one time in the week where we would come together as a whole family. And it was usually on Sunday afternoon after lunch. I don't want to be watching the soccer. But it would be that time. So we're going to take 20 minutes as a family. And my dad would get his big old Bible out and he would read a verse with us. And he would do the devotion part of that. And then, we would pray together as a family. And that would be a chance for us really just to kind of connect, talk about our week, what we've got going on, and pray about it. And for the most part, like as a kid, I didn't really think that much of it. It was just part of our routine. But man, looking back at it now, just thinking like how powerful that was, how that built our relationship together, how that helped us grow in our faith and in the safety of my parents, care. And so I wanted to provide a resource that would help families to do that. Mm-hmm. Whether it was you do this book, once a night for 52 days straight, whether you read the whole book in one go, mm-hmm. however you want to do this book, but at the very least, give families an opportunity to have one time in the week where they get a rhythm together and they actually talk. So. Yeah.
I love it. And one thing I love about your book is the fact that it is a once a week thing. Mm-hmm. Number one is parents, like I said, I have 4 kids myself, work a job, 10, 12, 14-hour days most of the week. Time is the mm-hmm. lesser of all the resources. So the fact that it's once a week allows me to really dive in with my kids and then taking those other 6 days to really reinforce, as you're working through those challenges, what that devotional is telling them and reminding them that through the time, allows us to really focus on it versus my, original idea. Hey, let's wake up every single morning, read a new one. We'll make it a whole passage out of this. Just not realistic for a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Information overload. Yeah. That's right. And I think that you talked about when you first tried it. It's like the kids got bored pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So the same thing happens for me sometimes. If this doesn't connect immediately to the kids, it's going to be tough. So in the book, there's lots of different sections to it. So there's a let's read, which is the Bible passage. Mm-hmm. Let's explore, which is the devotion part. But then we have let's laugh. So there's a dad joke. Let's
love your dad jokes in that, by the way.
Yeah, my kids don't. And let's talk. Let's discuss. So there's more to it to keep the kids engaged. Mm-hmm. So even if they're maybe a little bored at the devotion part, which I hope they're not, but at least they've got a joke to look forward to or some fun fact that they. So it just for me, I found that really the devotion books that we read where there was some more fun stuff for kids. you don't want to make, at the end of the day, there's a fine line with anything with faith, like whether it's going to church, whether it's, reading Bible with your kids, it can go one way or the other. Usually there's not like a middle ground. It's either the kids just don't like it and resent it, or they love it. So I, as a dad, I want my kids to love their faith. I want them to love God's word. I want them to love Jesus. And I don't want them to resent that. I don't want them to dislike it or be bored by faith. I want them to see their faith in action. I want them to see God move and answer their prayers. And so it's a fine line that we have as parents. Is like we can very easily put kids off quite quickly, and I do see that a lot. And I'm guilty of that as well. Kind of sometimes we can overload our kids with church. I work at a church, and so that's very much a challenge for us as parents. Me as a dad with my kids is what takes dad away from them. Like for you, it's like they probably don't really think much about like your dealership, right?
Yeah,
Where you work. They're not like big fans.
Because they're big fans of the snacks that we have in the waiting room. We have a little robot that drives around. Big fans of that, but not a ton of thought into that.
Yeah, so they're not like super enthusiastic because this is what takes dad away from us, right? So for me as a pastor, I have to be very, very conscious. Like, okay, the church is what's drawing me away from my family physically. So what do I do to help kids still love the church, even though it's where dad works? And I even think that just whether you work at church or not is like sometimes you can overexpose your kids to church. It's like, I do see some of those kids that go to everything. Like their parents bring them on Wednesday nights. They come to every event. They're there 2-3 services on a Sunday, and I just see these kids checking out. Like I feel for them. I was that kid, like had to be there all the time. And I think it's like you have to, whatever church you go to as a parent, I would say that you need to make sure that church is a place that your kids love going to. If they don't, you need to move churches.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they don't take care of your kids well, if they are not, if your kids aren't, like now, it's a pretty strong statement, of course, but I think you as a parent really do need to start thinking, okay, is this pouring into my kid or is this just withdrawing from my kid? And so you need to look for signs of like, okay, my kid enjoys coming, like I don't have too much trouble getting them out of bed to come to church. That they're building relationship with some of their leaders. That they're having a fun time. That like they're learning stuff. That they're coming home talking about. Then that's all good stuff. But if your kids are just like, oh, we've got to go to church again. I hate church. It's like, okay, there's a red flag for you. Because in the end, here's a really cool quote. From a guy called Frederick Douglass, and it says, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults.
Ooh,
and
powerful.
So, and so I think that okay, you as an adult, maybe you're growing in your faith. At this church that you belong to, but if your kids aren't, they're going to get broken. And so what you want to prioritize as a Christian parent is now, okay, passing on faith to next generation. That's one of the reasons that the Israelites through the Old Testament continually got themselves in hot water, and how they continually got away from God is because they neglected passing on faith to the next generation. So in Deuteronomy 6 talks very much about the importance of passing on faith to the next generation. And so that's actually what this book's based on is that passage of sharing your faith in the everyday. So yeah, I think it's really important to like look through your whole Christian faith through the lens of your kids. And if they're not getting it, if they're not growing, if they're resenting the Christian faith, you probably need to make some changes
in the environment. Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for being so open and raw about that. I know as a pastor, it must be a controversial and hard thing to say. So I can appreciate that. Now, I want to dive more into in a minute, what type of church, what things that me as a parent and a newer believer, newer person going to church should look for in church. What are some signs? What are that fruits of the Spirit? So we'll kind of, that a church should display when trying to teach my kids. But I want to back up just a little bit. And as like I said, I'm a newer Christian. I always say I started going to church in 2017, started living like a Christian in 2020, which are very different things. But by the grace of God, our kids have kind of grown up in the church. And I will tell you, and I know that you were pivotal in putting together a lot of these programs and curriculum to teach my kids. And I will tell you, man, my kids love going to church.
Good.
They love not only what they learn, but the staff around them. The projects they get to do, the different conferences you guys hold for kids that my kids just look forward to every single year. So kudos there. My kids love it. You've done a great job. But as I start inviting some of my friends to church for the first time that are parents, especially of younger children, here's the number one question that I get and pushback to going that I get that I was very surprised about. Number one question I get is, how can I make sure that my kids are going to be safe at church? And very surprising to me the first time I heard it. Then the second, third time, I'm like, wow, this is a trend. This is concerning. So you being the person that put together, I imagine, a lot of those safety protocols for children, what can you say to kind of set a parent's mind at ease about bringing their kids to church for the first time and that kid's safety?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So for us, safety is the number one priority at my church at Bayside. If the kids aren't safe, then forget everything else you're going to do. So things that you can for sure look for is most churches will have a good check-in, check-out system. So you can't just drop your kid off into a classroom and hope for the best. I think you certainly need to see those layers of security, particularly when you check in. Usually the kid will get a sticker with their name on with a code, then you'll get another sticker which has the same code, and so you can't pick up the kid without showing that sticker. So that's kind of your ticket for that. And then obviously looking at the layout of the kids' building, like how many exits and entrances and what's locked, what's not locked, who's manning the doors, those kind of things are very, we concentrate on that a lot and just making sure the building is secure and safe. I would look for how many adults are in the classroom with the kid. If there's one adult in a class of 25 kids, then that church isn't getting their ratios right. So we always ensure that there's never a room that has less than 2 adults. And then I would ask a church, if you're really concerned, can you look at a copy of their policies and procedures manual?
Well, you can do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've had that very occasionally, but where's your policy? Okay, so in that's for ours, it's a full-on booklet with every scenario possible. So what are our diaper changing policies? What is a bathroom policy? What is our evacuation policy? What's our lockdown procedure? What's the process for onboarding new volunteers? Do you live scan? There's actually a lot that goes into putting together the kind of security of a kids ministry. It's like a school. So if you can easily wander around the hallways during a service and you can walk into a classroom without being checked, that's probably a little bit of a red flag. But really, I go to a lot of these conferences that the churches really are very hot on that. And obviously you can look up stories of where there's scandal, where there's been moral failure, where there's been security breaches, where there's been horrible things that have happened. And so churches are very keenly aware of that. One, it's just the right thing to do is to keep kids safe. And two, they want to protect their reputation. If there's something that goes wrong in a kids ministry, that's can be fatal for a church. And so Most churches, those are the things that you need to look for, and I'm pretty sure most churches would have that pretty much locked in.
Pretty much locked in. And I'll tell you from a parent's point of view who's been going to Bayside campuses for some time, I mean, your guys' check-in, check-out process is fantastic. Even when we go quite frequently, my wife sometimes will go twice a week. I'm working, but every single Sunday. And the volunteers start to know you, and I still never get any of my kids out without showing them a sticker, verifying the code. Which
is gold.
I appreciate that so much. Down to what you guys do with food allergies, you know, making sure that our kids are safe. Our kids do have some food allergies. But I'll tell you one thing that really sticks out about the program that you've led is how much the volunteers and the staff members truly care about the kids.
Right.
You know, we've had relationships with people, some of the people that were on your staff, where they're really, pouring into our kids, checking on them outside of church times. My wife has built some amazing friendships with some of your staff members where now they're they're friends, outside of the church thing. So fantastic job there. But the other things that I really noticed was this, and again, this is me coming from a perspective of somebody not who works at a church, but just drops my kids off there. Right, and attends and a part of the church. Number one, security guards outside of entrances and exits. You can tell they're being very visual of kids' behavior as they're leaving. Are they comfortable with the person that they're with? You see that eye contact being made. They're not just standing there, which I think goes a really, really long way for me as a parent. Finding out, as I was trying to find where I can volunteer at church, and I thought, well, I'm like to view myself as tough sometimes and very visual and security, oriented.
I wouldn't mess with you.
Thank you. I won't say that, but I thought maybe my place here would be a part of like a security team. And so my wife was volunteering in the children's ministry at the time, and she reached out to somebody and asked him, and they said, well, does he want to be a part of security or Secret Service? And I'm like, what? You guys have a Secret Service here? I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. They're like, yeah, there's plainclothes people that are police officers that are looking out during the services. So I just want to kind of put newer churchgoers a little bit at ease that, man, the church has your kids' safety at heart. And I've seen that in Bayside. I can't speak on too many other churches. From what you're saying, going to these conferences, that is number one. So I would tell you, at least at Bayside, bring your kids. They're safe. They're poured into. And as a parent, I truly appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and that's even I was on staff. Sometimes I don't know who the secret
really
security is. It's like, suddenly they'd show up and you're like, oh,
that's you.
Okay.
But I love that. I love it as number one, attending church, and number two, for my kids going there, that means a lot. So.
No, it's like I said, it's super important. We are shepherds of these kids in that time that they're with us. And a good shepherd takes care of his flock. So it's, we treat that, it's, responsibility with a lot of care. And that's one thing I would maybe keeps me awake at night is the safety of the kids in our care. It's just so important.
Absolutely. Now, let's say this. Let's say that I am a parent of a child with special needs. Does Bayside specifically, obviously that's where you're at currently, and do other churches keep that in mind? And what can I expect bringing my special needs child to church for the first time?
Great question, because not all churches have provision for kids with special needs. Thankfully, Bayside does. And that's just a biblical thing to do, right? Is we need to welcome everybody. The Lord says very clearly about how we, visit the prisoner, how we take care of the poor, the widows, the marginalized. The church needs to be very, very much a place where families on the edge of society and the community who often really don't get to participate fully. Church has to be that place for them where they can come and know that I am welcome here. This place is for me. And so very much like, from a philosophical, spiritual, a biblical perspective, every church in my mind needs to be welcoming to all and has to be proactive and intentional with that. So we are a Bayside. So if you have a child with special needs, there's kind of two approaches to it is, that child may need some just one-on-one support in the regular activities that we provide. And so we will have a buddy system. So if you came to a Bayside church, for the most part, what we would do is we would have a conversation with, okay, like tell us about, your child. What are maybe some of the diagnoses that he has? What are some things that work? What are things that trigger him? How can we best support you? So we listen to the parents. They know their kid more than anybody. So that's who we need to learn from first. And then we try and tailor their experience to those needs. And so whether that is, you come into the regular service, but it's loud and it's bright, so we'll give you some headphones, ear defenders. That's all you need. There may be some other children that may be further in the spectrum that actually need, more of a full-time environment and support. And so we have rooms with multi-sensory activities. Maybe it's just quieter, and they'll still have the Bible. So we always make sure that we will meet the kids where they're at, but they deserve to hear about Jesus as much as anybody else. And so it's very much a partnership with the parents, trial and error. So it's either full kind of environment full time during the service that they get to hang out in, or they're going to get a hybrid that they get to go into the activities and maybe come back, have, that time, that split time between. And we do try and have a one-on-one ratio. So there's a one-on-one buddies. So if you came to Bayside and you said, hey, first time you were there, say, hey, my child's got special needs. What can you do to support? I am absolutely sure that you would get a warm welcome, and then we would have a conversation about making that experience the best. We used to, my old church in Missouri, we used to run respite nights, and I know we do that too at Bayside. So it's basically just providing a date night or just some respite, right, for these parents. A lot of these parents, they're literally 24/7 with their child. And they just don't get a break. And so the church is able to provide, because we have the people and the facilities and the environment, the know-how, we're able to provide, maybe a 3-4 hour evening where they get to just, I remember one time we did a respite night and a lady dropped off her teenage son, a lot of needs. And when she came back at the end of the night to pick the child up, I would love to always ask, see the parents and ask them, what did they do with that time? Did you go for a meal? Did you go and do shopping? And she said that I went and I sat in my car for the whole time in the parking lot and just had peace and quiet.
Wow.
I was like, so all I wanted to do was just sit in the car and sit in silence.
Yeah.
And just have some time to myself. And I was like, bless that woman. My heart broke for her. Yeah, I was just so overjoyed that we could just provide that for her. And so when the church can do that for people, when those families that just don't get a break, that just have no let up from being a full-time parent, just being able to provide even just a few hours of support and care and love and rest. So that's why that's another huge aspect of why I love doing what I do is, supporting families that just really need the church to come alongside them and support them and help them get through the week.
Yeah. And I know it's so refreshing for me and my wife to go on Sundays, drop our kids off at children's ministry, not as a daycare, because we know they're being poured into. They walk out of there and they want to show me the art projects they did. And I ask them the same question, what'd you learn today? And they can actually comprehend and tell me what they learned, at least the brief overview of it.
Yeah, it's more than, it was good.
Yeah. And even my 5-year-old son has a best friend at church, and I love that. But you're right. Having that hour and a half that me and my wife can sit in church, drink a coffee together, worship, listen to a great message, man, it goes so far for us. And with our 4 kids, that hour and a half is one of my favorite times of the week. So, but I will add a caveat to that, right? So, on average, studies say that people attend church once every 5 weeks. Wow.
Okay. So if that's true, then for most families, they bring their kids to church Now you're a regular, right? You go every week, and there's a lot of people that are regular, but on average, people go once every 5 weeks to church. And so there's actually very little time that kids spend in church. So even if they're a really super regular attender, it's going to be about 40, 45 times in a year a kid will attend church. So that's 45 hours. Over the course of a year, a parent spends 3,000 waking hours with their child, okay? So as a kids pastor, I get to pour into a regular attender maybe 40 times a year. Yet you have 3,000 hours with your child. Who's going to have the most influence, and even spiritually? And so I see this so often, is that parents outsource the spiritual growth of their kids to the church. And so they think, well, if I'm bringing him to church, I'm good. I've checked that box. The kids pastors will help my kids grow in their faith. And it's like, no, there's only so much we can do. We can have a great experience. We can teach the kids all the but I might be your kid's pastor now, but in 20 years' time, I'm not going to be around. Who will be? You will be as a parent. It's me as a parent of my kids. I can't expect hand over the responsibility for the spiritual growth of my kids to their student leaders, their student pastors. They're not going to be in their lives in 10, 20 years. I am. And so coming back to it, attending church is just one small part of the spiritual formation of kids. The biggest part is what happens inside the four walls of your home. And when you do open up God's word, and when you have those faith conversations, and when your kids see you reading the Bible, when their kids see you praying with your spouse, when your kids see you having moments of faith, that's really where the spiritual growth happens. And so I'm under no illusions that as a kids pastor, like I am the answer to your kids' spiritual growth. I'm really sorry, it's not. There's only so much time we have with the kids. And we're the cherry on the cake.
I love that. I love the fact that you understand that it is the parent's responsibility, and you're just a resource provided by God to help strengthen that. And I love that. I remember one of my kids came to me one time. You probably remember this. It was shortly after we met. My son came to me and he says, "Dad, I think the stories in the Bible are just made up and make-believe." He goes, "I love them, and I like going to church, but I think they're make-believe." And that's when it hit me like, whoa, I need to step up what I'm doing as a father and the talks that I'm having with my son. And I remember I reached out to you and I said, "James, what do I do?" You showed me some resources and said, "Hey, man, sit down and do this with your kids," which I can really appreciate. But you're absolutely right. And I'll rewind back. You were actually here with Jeremy Brownlee for the taping of his episode. You were back here.
I had to just like make sure that he didn't go too much off the rails.
And that he was in a safe place.
Yeah. I was his carer.
You were his manager that day. But I remember one of the stories that he told as he talked about his experience being young in faith and going to church was that his parents would be arguing, saying terrible things to each other on their way to church. Then they would get to church and it's, "Hey brother, how you doing? I'm feeling blessed today." And I remember him telling the story that really pushed him away from faith in his younger years. So being a kids pastor, what do you have to say on top of that? We need to be in the word with our kids, walking our kids through that faith. What responsibilities do we have as parents? And I'd say specifically me and you as fathers in leading our kids in the right direction in their walk of faith.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I think, the problem Jeremy had was lack of authenticity of his parents, okay? It's like you say one thing but do another, okay? And I think that's, so important as fathers is that we practice what we preach, that we live out our faith, we do what we say. And so I'm telling you now, the thing I was most nervous about coming onto this podcast was, okay, we're going to talk about parenting. Like, I am not the best parent by any means, okay? If you're thinking, oh, we'll get James, a kids pastor, on, he's obviously going to be an amazing parent. every day is a struggle, and it just seems to get harder. Okay, so I want you to hear this, like coming from someone who I just struggle with being a godly parent every day. All right, so hard questions for bad Christians. Like at times, I just feel like I talk to tell my wife, like, well, are we doing this right? Like, what are we doing here? So, but I think it's just like persevere. Just don't give up. Don't like build in those routines. Okay. So we might just have a really rough day with the kids, and I lose my patience and temper with them, and things are going wrong. But man, I know that I've got those 5, 10, 20 minutes with my kids at the end of the day where we sit down and we pray. And that might be all it is we do. We just say a prayer, or, we read scripture together, or we redo our devotion, or we just have a conversation. It's like, you gotta put those rhythms in place where it's like, okay, we're just gonna recenter today. So find those rhythms and routines where you go, well, we're gonna pray about this. I think it's also looking for those God moments in the everyday. So, when your kid comes home from school and they've had a hard day, like something's gone wrong, like looking for those moments. Well, let's actually pray about that right now. Let's just give that to Jesus, because he knows how you feel. Let's pray about it. Or maybe it's like, remember that devotion we did a couple of weeks ago that said that? Or it's you're just driving along and you see something beautiful and some scenery, like, should we just thank God for that beautiful sunset? Or, so it's just those everyday moments that, I think I sometimes forget to include God in. And when you do, it's allowing your kids to like faith is a normal everyday thing. It's just not an event that happens on a Sunday. It's like, this is our life. This is who we are. So, when my kids are like, oh, I don't want to go to church today or whatever, it's like we say, okay, the church isn't what we go to. Church is who we are. And I think when your faith, when your faith becomes like who you are in the everyday, and you don't have to be a super theologian. You don't have to like know scripture and be able to answer every question. So on that, actually, as your kids get older, they ask more and more difficult questions. Actually, when they're little, they ask difficult questions, right? And I think it's really okay for you. And the temptation as dads is like, we know everything, right? Kid asks you a question, I've got the answer.
Yep.
And sometimes we think we do that with faith and faith questions. And sometimes it's like, you know what, I actually really want to answer that question well and not confuse my kids. So it's okay to go, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to think about that and I'll get back to you. And go away and give yourself some time and space to think about how you're going to have that conversation with the kid. And also I think it's like, again, come back to the authenticity is your kids need to know that you are flawed and that you're ready to apologize and that you are ready to admit that, you know what, I'm broken just like anybody else. And I think when sometimes our temptation as dads and parents is to put ourselves on this pedestal that we are just, we're king, we know everything, and that we're, I think my boys really appreciate my vulnerability, and that sometimes, I just have to apologize to my kids, or I have to say, like, I let a cuss word, a soft cuss word slip out a couple of weeks ago in front of my kids, and it was funny. Joey, my 11-year-old, like he was so annoyed at me. He said, I just did not like the fact that you said that word, Dad. And I was like, you know what, son, I am so sorry. I didn't try and justify it. I was like, you're right. Next time if I do that again, you do the exact same thing.
Good for you.
It's just you got to be humble in front of your kids sometimes, and I think that's who Jesus was, and I think that the more that you can be a living, tangible representation of Jesus to kids and all of his characteristics, the more they're gonna like see Jesus and their dad as like as authentic.
I will tell you that one thing I tell my kids, and I had a very similar experience to yours. I don't remember what I said, but I said something, and my son said, "Dad, we don't talk like that." I looked at my son. I said, "Absolutely, son, you're right." And I brought it back up to him later, and I used a very specific word, and I did it on purpose. I said, "Thank you, son, for helping to hold me accountable." Then what I did, the next time I had to correct him, I used the same word. "Hey, son, part of my job as your father is to hold you accountable." And I want them to know that this is a two-way street. Dad's not perfect. Dad's willing to apologize, just like what you did, right? And Dad appreciates you holding me accountable. And so I love that you said that. And I want to back up a little bit, just mention one thing that you said that I think is so refreshing to newer believers like myself, right? A lot of times we start going to church for the first time and we look at the leadership of the church, the pastors, especially the speaking and teaching pastors, right, that you see every Sunday. And you think, man, I strive to be like this guy. And for you to walk in as a children's pastor and say, "Hey, I don't have this parenting thing 100% figured out, and I lose my temper every once in a while, and I'll use a soft cuss word that my 11-year-old has to remind me not to say." I just want to tell you, James, thank you so much from all of us newer believers, all of us believers out there, for being so genuine. And hey, man, this is who I am. And I think things like that is what keeps people going to church. So thank you for that, even if you didn't realize how impactful that was on me. So
I honestly, sometimes I'm just like, I have that imposter syndrome of like, Lord, why am I a pastor? Like, why do I have that title? And so, occasionally God will just remind me that that's what I am. I'm a pastor. I'm a shepherd. I'm not called to be perfect. I'm just called to be obedient. And so, we're all parents are pastors, shepherds, right? We have our own sheep that we have to take care of, that we have to protect, that we have to feed, that we have to lead. And so just because I have a title that's related to a church doesn't give me any more spiritual weight than any parent, because we all have to be shepherds. We all have to be pastors, even if it's just to our own little flock.
I love it. Well said. Let's back up again. If I'm a newer believer, bringing my kids somewhere between the age of, let's say, 2 or 3 to 10 years old to church for the first time, right? My experience is drop my kid off, know my kid's safe, meet some really nice volunteers. Then I go into the church service, but I don't really know what my kids do while they're there. I know you can, you've worked at the large church in Missouri, obviously work for Bayside now. Give us as parents, what's my kid going to experience?
That's a good question, actually. There's so many people that they have no idea what happens in the church. They've been going for years, no idea what their kids do, because all they get is snippets on the way home from what their parents did. So that's a good question. So we focus on the age of the kid and their learning styles. So a kid learns primarily through auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. What do they see? What do they hear? What do they do? So that's through the lens of, so whatever classroom, whatever age group their kid is doing, they're going to have activities that's age appropriate. And so if they're younger, it's going to be much more play. There's going to be much more kinesthetic. They're going to do stuff. They're going to make a craft. They're going to have Play-Doh. They're going to have toys out. But there'll always be some level of like Bible teaching and worship as part of that. So it might be they have a Bible story told to them and read to them. It might be a Bible story on a TV screen. And then there'll be some level of worship. So usually the program for a kids ministry, here's kind of basic run through of the morning. It'll be like free play. Then we'll all come together. We'll maybe do a prayer, worship. We'll maybe do like a game, some fun kind of activity that relates in some loose way to the lesson that morning. Then they'll have a Bible story, preferably at Bayside. It's like a live storytelling, a person telling them that, because then they get the kinesthetic, the joining in, they get to be part of it, they get to act it out. So they get to learn creatively. Then they'll have a small group time. So then they get to process what they've just learned. So with a small group leader. So then there's the kind of relational aspect, and then there's the kind of learning through conversation, through doing. That's really empowering for our volunteers at that point, because then they can answer questions that the kids might have. And then they might do a craft or activity, again, some kind of like fun activity that relates to the lesson in some way. Again, thinking about the learning through doing. Mm-hmm. The end of that time, we'll maybe pray, maybe do a little offering, talk about giving. There might be maybe another video that kind of consolidates the lesson, and then free play as the kids are picked up. So what the parents see is when they drop off, it's free play. When they come back and pick them up, it's free play. But there's a whole load of Jesus that gets packed in between that sandwich of free play. Mm-hmm. So any good church is thinking about the age group, what's appropriate. They're thinking about the learning styles. They're thinking about relevance. Like, here's the curriculum, here's the Bible lesson, but this is what it actually means for kids, and this is how they process that when they talk about it in their small groups.
Very interesting. I know with my kids, one of their favorite things is to go to the tables afterwards, grab the art that they did.
Yeah.
But I love the way as a parent that I'll say, well, what is that? And they won't just...
What is that?
What is that, right? They don't just look at it, though, and tell me like, oh, I colored something. They tell me the story behind
That's the purpose
what
of it.
the art project they did. And so to hear this now kind of opening the hood, as you say, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's how they're learning.
The way I see it, it's like, it's not the product, it's the process. Mm-hmm. So we know full well, 95% of those craft projects might not even make it home. They'll stay in the car for a couple of weeks, or they may make it to the fridge magnet for a few weeks. But, it's not, we really want them to do a great job at this art project. Mm-hmm. It's just the whole process of what they were doing and thinking when they were making it. And it's a good time filler.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good. Now, other question I have. So at Bayside, you guys do a lot of events for kids outside of just Sundays. Mm-hmm. I know my kids have gone to them. If a parent is thinking about sending their kids to, a camp style or a couple day, thing for their kids, what advice would you give them for that? If the kids or the parents are apprehensive at all, can you speak on that, kind of some of the events outside of church?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's one of the biggest things we do is called Breakaway, which is it's like a vacation Bible school on steroids. Is basically literally that's how we describe it. So that would be a summer camp, or we do similar one night events that are kind of similar. So they are like basically like what we do with kids on a weekend, but like ramped up 10 times more. So. But then there will be like these very unique, like summer, like massive experiences that the kids will never get through the year. So things like go-karts, things like messy art. So messy art where they're literally like you can just spend 20 minutes spraying each other with paint, washable paint. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then there will still be those elements that we do have on a Sunday, but just ramped up. So there'll be like huge like worship. There'll be, in songs. There'll be like fun teaching and drama and storytelling. They'll be in small groups, and generally it'll be like one theme for the week, or it'll be like a one Bible story. And so you really kind of dig deep into that Bible story and that theme for the week. So by the end of the week, you've really got it. What parents can expect is pretty much all the same as what I talked about as far as the safety and the check-in and all of those procedures. That again is the priority. Mm-hmm. But what the parents will also expect is the kids will just be like blown away by how much fun they have, and they will come home exhausted, desperate to come back the next day. They'll be probably very messy and sweaty, and will just have had a great they would just have everything that comes with being a kid. Mm-hmm. That's our experience, and obviously, like particularly during the summer, it's a pretty cheap way it's pretty cheap childcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the kids have an absolute blast and they have a great time. And it just, for a lot of those kids, that's their only experience of church. And so we know that's probably the only week they're going to come through these doors. So we're going to just show them Jesus and show how much fun it can be being a Christian.
Amen. I love it. Well, I will tell you, when my kids went for the first time, they came home exactly like you said, messy. They weren't ready to throw paint all over everybody yet, but I know they talked about it. They'll get there. But I mean, they just came home with friends. They came home with great stories. The number one thing that I was appreciative of, they came home very tired and ready for bed. Thank you guys for that. But you can tell that they were poured into. So my advice to parents, no matter what age your kids are, if you can get them involved in things like that, it is just completely a game changer. The other thing that we noticed with our kids is after they started going to programs like Breakaway, they were way more excited to go to church the next week. You know, it's like, now we have friends. Oh, I know that person. I know this person. So love that. Parents out there, make sure you see that. Now, got a couple other questions for you, back to kind of those hard questions. So me and you know, in the Bible, there's a lot of very difficult stories to understand. You know, you really got to understand the context in those stories to make them make sense, especially when you start kind of getting into the Old Testament and some of the stories in there. So being a children's pastor, me as a parent, do I talk to my kids? Do I talk my kids through those difficult stories? Do we bypass for the time being? When is it appropriate? What would your 2 cents be with that?
Well, my 2 cents would be that with those harder stories, you don't ignore them, but you just proceed with caution.
Okay.
And really get some context and think through like what is appropriate for a kid to really like think about and know. So I'm for sure a proponent of giving kids the whole picture, the whole story of God. And so when you look back in some of those Old Testament stories, it's like context is everything, right? This is not how God wants us to behave and live right now, but it like at the time it was appropriate. And so when you look back at some of the history aspects of the Bible, there's some challenging aspects to that. You know, you tell the story of Noah's Ark, and what a cute little story that is. What you don't often hear is like the end of that story, Noah was drunk and naked, you know. You don't often hear that in kids' church. And so sometimes it's like, well, what's the purpose of telling kids that part of it other than it's just going to like freak them out? So I think we again have to be good shepherds and like protect kids from anything that's inappropriate, right? Just like we protect our kids from watching inappropriate TV shows or YouTube videos. Probably the same applies to some aspects of the Bible, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And then being ready for when they ask questions about that, being able to be ready to have those conversations. So don't just completely disregard and ignore aspects of God's word because you just don't want to have that conversation, but also just, you know, proceed with caution and just be careful what you do. But don't be afraid to have those conversations. And again, like going back to it, it's like, you know what, I don't actually know why like women weren't allowed to, you know, go to church without something on their heads. Like, let me think about that and come back to you, or even, you know, crazier things that happen in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So we live out in the country, and we've had some heavy rainfall. It's winter as we're recording this episode, and one of our roads leading to our house flooded.
Right.
So our kids overheard us saying this, and we were just in the story of Noah, and they freaked out. There's a flood there. I said, no. And so we had to rewind it a little bit. Okay, hey, the flood in the Bible is a little different than what we're experiencing. Exactly, yeah. So it's just funny that you say that. It maybe remind me that of, you know, how kids' brain works and how parents, we got to dial it back a little bit. Okay, let's have this discussion of the difference of two different types of flooding.
I love how kids are so concrete thinking. Like I was once doing a object lesson in church and it was going really wrong and I was messing up. And I remember saying, off the cuff, I said, I'm losing my marbles here. Sorry. Well, later on in that service, I see this kid like crawling around, looking under like some cabinets and stuff. And I'm like, so what are you doing? She says, I was looking for your marbles. I was like, no, I wasn't.
You took that literally.
Yeah.
That is funny.
So I think it's, remembering with kids how like, concrete they don't think like in pictures and metaphor like we do, and the Bible is is full of that. And so sometimes it's our job again is just to help kids like translate that things in kids' language.
Mm-hmm.
So it's true of God's word. It's like we have to just go, okay, well, this is the story, this is what it's saying, but like let me help you understand that in language that you understand.
Mm-hmm.
I love those conversations with my kids about like, what is, when they start asking, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when your kid says to you, what does that mean? Don't be frustrated by that. See that as a great opportunity for you to really think through, this is helping me in my faith, grow in my faith. Like my kids are helping me grow because they get to ask those simple questions that actually open up a whole world of like learning for us as adults.
I remember when you had prescribed me some materials to talk with my kid about the Bible when he was having some doubts.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you told me. You're like, hey, he's going to get a lot out of this and that, and you might learn something too. And I did. So it's a great opportunity.
It was the Case for Christ series.
It was.
Lee Strobel books.
Yes,
yeah, they were awesome.
They're amazing. So a couple other questions I had for you. Number one, us as parents, when we're leading our children, what do you think the biggest mistake that we make as parents is that you see as a children's pastor? Or maybe rephrase it, what do you think that us as parents could be doing better? And I think we've already touched on this a little bit with kind of walk our faith, right? Be faith when we're at home. Make sure we're, reading the Bible with our kids, living as best as we can as Christians. But do you see any other mistakes, any other warning flags you'd give us parents?
Yeah, I think it's this may sound like really general, but just like I think sometimes we just make assumptions a lot that our kids get things or are growing in their faith. So I think I make that mistake of just making the assumption that my kid knows how to behave in this situation, or my kid understands why we're doing this. So we can fall into that trap of just like making a lot of assumptions that our kids are okay, that our kids are emotionally fine, or that they're hanging around with the right friends at school. Or it's like, I think it's just so important really just to make sure that we do stay in the real details and we have those regular check-ins with our kids. And I'm learning this now as a parent of an almost 15-year-old is the older he gets, the less I see in his life. I think it's like there's that natural progression as the child begins to like flee the nest. They grow in their independence and they crave that independence, and they want their own lives. And so there's an element as a parent that you've got to let them go. But I think also you have to still have that relationship with that child that they can feel safe telling you everything. There's a really good book I want to recommend to your listeners for dads. It's called The Intentional Father by John Tyson. And he basically documents that when his son turned 13, he was going to go on a very intentional project of preparing his son for adulthood. And so he was very intentional with like rites of passage, with getting other adults around his son about reading books and the Bible together with his son, to having experiences, to having this daily check-in with his son. Now, I would like reading that book, I was like, oh, that would be awesome. I want to do this. That was worked for him. It doesn't work for everybody. Having 30 minutes one-on-one time with your son all through his teenage years. But I can just see the power of that, at least being intentional. Like find things that you can be intentional with to help you keep that relationship strong with your kids, to keep the conversation open so that they don't shut down from their parents, so they're open. So, I'm learning this as a dad of a 14-year-old is like this. I could let him have so many secrets. I could let him just go through life without having someone to process and have that wisdom and somebody speaking. And so I have to make that effort. He's not going to. I have to keep being intentional with helping him grow, not just in his faith, but just as he becomes a man. Like what mistakes did I make that I don't want to see my own kids make? What am I going to actually be intentional about doing about that? So maybe it could be something to do with finances. Maybe you were never taught how to handle finances well as a kid, and that really messed you up for the large part of your adult life. It's like, okay, how intentional are you going to be to make sure that doesn't happen with your kids? Mm-hmm. What lessons in life have you learned that you don't want your kids to have to learn the hard way like you did? And be intentional about that. Get help, read, research, have conversations. So I don't know, that's a long answer to it.
That was a great answer. That was fantastic. Yeah. And just speaking on what you said about, if we weren't taught things or we had to learn them the hard way, let's save our kids from having to go through that walk. I love it. That's great advice there. Now, I'm going to ask you one other hard question here, and then we'll kind of start wrapping it up. So if my kid's going to school, and my kid goes to church with me, involved in children's ministry, friends that are in church, but then they start getting influenced from people outside that, let's say, have very different opinions, or that kid's parents have very different opinions than what we do. What do you recommend for parents then? What have you seen that's effective for keeping your kid on that walk?
Never let them out of the house again.
Just lock them up, lock them in the room. No other friends that aren't Christians. Yeah.
Keep them in that bubble. Yeah. No, I think that's whereas parenting is a partnership with your kid. You got to accept that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. All right. Your kids are going to be surrounded by kids who have completely different worldviews about faith, about morals, whatever. So you just got to accept that. And so I think that's why pretty much everything we just talked about is just so important. Is like getting your kids grounded in faith for themselves. The idea is that eventually they're living out their faith for themselves, not that they're relying on you as a parent for that. And so it's continually giving them the tools they need for life. And so the advice I would be is just keep doing all of that. We send one of our boys, our youngest kid, to the Bayside Church, the Adventure Christian School. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we send him to a Christian school. All of their curriculum is from a biblical point of view. All the teachers are Christians. A lot of the kids come from church Christian homes. Does that now mean that he's completely protected from the world? Absolutely not. Kids are kids, right? Mm-hmm. And even though he goes to a Christian school, he's got a much better chance of being in an environment where he's not going to be faced with lots of different views on faith and God. My oldest son doesn't. He goes to a very multicultural charter school where there's almost any faith is treated on this equal level. But I find that both my kids have pretty much still the same challenges about owning their faith and standing up for what's right and being a light in a dark world. And I think that's what I always try and get into my kids is be a light, be a light in the world. You make the right choice. Mm-hmm. And not feeling like they've got to, again, be little theologians. It's they've just got to live out and represent Jesus through their actions, through how they do their work, how they respond to their teacher, how they react in situations that challenge right and wrong. And again, it's if you've got that regular check-in and tell me about your day, let's talk about it, having that open conversation. Again, it comes back to that rhythm of it's more likely the kids are going to process some of the challenges they're facing or the questions that they have if you're actually creating the environment for them to actually do that. Because otherwise, they're probably not always going to voluntarily talk about what's going on. Mm-hmm. But if you got to open that door for them. Mm-hmm. On a regular basis, and they know at the end of the day, I'm going to get to talk to Dad about this or Mom about this. Mm-hmm.
To wrap this up, if you're talking to a parent who's a newer believer, and you can give them one recommendation that they can start doing tomorrow, today, tonight, what would that number one piece of advice from James?
Buy this book.
I love it. Love it. Love it.
No. Don't throw in the towel. Yeah. The best is yet to come for you, for your family. Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Like, God has a plan for you and your family. And going back to like how I talked about Abraham, God had a plan for him and his descendants. Just lean into that. God has a plan for your kids, and he has a plan for you as a parent. And just don't give up. Do not give up. If you what's done is done. What's in the past, mistakes we've all made as parents, they're in the past. It's about what you do in the future that counts. So hopefully there's just maybe one little thing from our conversation that maybe is like, I need to start looking for a devotion book, or I just need to say a prayer with my kids, or I need to start bringing them to church. Whatever that is, just start somewhere. Don't give up.
What a great answer. I'm glad that was recorded so I can rewind that back on some nights when I'm just thinking I'm not winning at this.
I need a reminder
of that one. Yeah. What a great way to end an episode. Now, James, if you could let our listeners know, where can they find your resources at? What's available out there? I know as us as parents, we're always looking for anything that can help. So how can the audience find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so this book, Let's Walk, that's on Amazon. You can find that easily. I've written 4 kids' picture books, so for younger kids. They are called Little Eyes, Big Faith. It's a series of books, again on Amazon. And they are picture books of Bible stories from the point of view of kids. So one of the books, for example, is called The Little Lunch That Fed a Bunch. And it's the little boy that gave his lunch to Jesus when he fed 5,000. So it's the whole story from his point of view in fun little pictures. Again, that's on Amazon. For more information just about me and my ministry, you can go to a website called thrivingkidmin.com. thrivingkidmin.com.
And it'll be linked down there. Matt's going to put it in the podcast for us, where they can have there. Again, James, I'll tell you this, man. I was so excited about this episode for multiple reasons. But number one, the way that my 2 oldest kids reacted when they found out that you were going to be on here. So for all the listeners out there, hope you pick something up today. Make sure you go and seek out some of these resources. I got my copy on Amazon. You can get your copy there as well. And I can't guarantee a lot of things in life, but I can guarantee you that James knows how to connect with children and teach them about God. And if you use these resources, it will make a difference. We end every episode reminding you it's easy to call yourself a Christian. It's hard to go out and do Christian stuff. So today, get up, be excited, go out. Let's do some Christian stuff. James, thanks for being here today, my friend.
It was my pleasure.